Thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to the Amryt story this evening. First most important point about Amryt is the team. This is not the full team, but these are some of the key folk on the team. So Joe is our CEO, is a medical doctor, he's a neurologist, but importantly he set up Sofinova in Europe and led it. So he has very good understanding of deal opportunities in this part of the world and beyond. Rory is a deal junkie. He's been involved in many deals over his career and a very strong finance guy. So a very strong duo on the deal side, which is why we exist as a company and why we're growing as a company from its inception. Mark is an interventional cardiologist. We work in the area of related cardiology areas, and he's a very strong individual dealing with the FDA and the EMA, which is no small thing to do. And I'm a through and through marketeer, sales, market access guy. I've been in the ethical sense, I've been selling drugs for nearly 25 years. I have to tell you, they're not worth looking me up after the show. They are all medicines, but I'm really grassroots in the commercial arena since I was first in sales and now in more global roles. And by the way, just so you're aware, it's interesting, our chairman of the board, who's not on here actually, is Harry Stratford, and Harry actually set up Shire, if you're familiar with Shire, and Prostrakan, and sold those off. So Harry is a great leader to have on our board of directors. We have regulatory and medical affairs, etc., strong leaders, but not shown here. Our vision is very simple. We want to build a world leader in the rare and orphan disease space by acquiring and developing and commercializing products that improve the lives of patients where the unmet medical need is extremely high actually in these populations. And it's really important just to note here that the acquiring, developing, commercializing products, this is all late stage typically. We have got a bit of early stage products, but it's typically late stage products. So we're not taking all of the early discovery and early R&D risk. You may be familiar with the rare disease space, the orphan disease space, which is a specific definition from a regulatory point of view. There's a lot of these conditions, probably more like 8,000, some of them are even uncharacterized. Only a small number of them actually have any treatment at all. And sadly, many of these patients don't live very long if they don't get a diagnosis, don't get to treatment. But when you add it all together, it's a large proportion of our population in the collective who have one or more of these conditions. If you look globally, we're talking large numbers of population, and from a financial perspective, it's a very large and growing faster actually than the more common disease area in terms of dollar growth of about 11% growth and 6.4% of the overall pharma business. So it's a very attractive sector, and the founding principle of that attractiveness is the unmet medical need, because when you solve unmet medical need with breakthrough therapy, then you will find people willing to invest in those treatments, and that's what I'm going to show you in a second. So our overview, in a nutshell, are these pillars. So we are a revenue generating company. We were founded in August of 2015. We're a young company, but we are already generating revenue. I'll come on to that in just a moment, but it's allowed us to build footprint across Europe, Middle East and Africa, which I'll describe to you in a moment. We have proven that we can grow our first commercial asset. In fact, in year one, we grew it by over 60%. I'll show you the P&L later, but this 11.9 million we reported publicly at the end of last year was coming off the back of a less than $7 million run rate. So we've really grown the asset very quickly, throwing off EBITDA into the business to fund some of our clinical programs. This deal I'll describe to you in a moment, but it's a royalties-based deal, so there was no upfront, and it's been the stimulus to allow us to build infrastructure which we can leverage with future assets. We have a pipeline, most notably a topical treatment for a very, very debilitating disease called Epidermolysis bullosa. These are called butterfly children. Their skin is so fragile it can blister at the slightest friction or touch, and they will spend many hours every day often being bandaged. There's about 5,000 of these children in the UK. About 2,000 of them are managed in hospitals like Great Ormond Street. It's a very large global opportunity. That's a management estimate, but there are other comps around that will tell you this is a market where there are not any approved treatments for these very unfortunate children. We have a very strong appetite to do deals. I spend a lot of my time looking at our future deal opportunities along with Rory, Joe and the team. So here we are now for a company born in August of 15. I'm excited with this slide to say we are already marketing a drug in adult HoFH, which is, I'll show you in a moment, it's a very severe form of hypercholesterolemia. These patients are born with 2 mutations on the receptors that recycle bad cholesterol, and they can have 10 times the amount of cholesterol that they should have, and they would live till the age of 18 on average if you didn't treat them. Very rare but very serious disease, and that's the commercial asset. We do have another approved product in partial thickness wounds, so severe burns and grafting population. Joe and Rory, before I joined, didn't launch it, so we can launch it, but we haven't launched it yet. Why? Because we're running the largest ever global phase 3 trial in epidermolysis bullosa, the largest ever trial ever conducted in this population of children I'll describe to you more in a second. And because that is a very high value opportunity, we wouldn't want to hamper the value opportunity by launching here, but it gives us an optionality depending on how that trial runs. We have one early asset that came in from the inception of the company that has the potential in resistant acromegaly, Cushing's disease, and neuroendocrine tumours, a type of somatostatin. And we also have acquired a gene therapy platform, and I'll describe that to you a little bit in a moment because it's early days, but it is a value driver in the near term, and it has huge potential breadth of applicability into different conditions in the future. So the way that we try and narrow this down to the 3 ways of thinking about the company for value creation is maximizing the opportunity on our commercial asset. It's a 125 million opportunity in the market, Europe, Middle East, Africa, that we are penetrating today. As I say, we grew it significantly in year 1. We've got a great team out there on the ground and partners in our non-core markets, and we're driving growth. Secondly, that epidermolysis bullosa global phase 3 study will read out at its interim in Q4 of this year. So we will get an interim efficacy analysis that's pre-planned with the FDA to get a sense of where that trial is tracking. Should we increase the trial, carry on as we are? There is a chance you have to stop a study if it's futile. We think that's unlikely. This study, therefore, has the opportunity to sample size adjust it to give it a good probability if we hit that interim analysis in Q4. That is a very exciting potential value driver for us, and top-line data in Q2 of next year. We would love this to be one of the first ever approved products to treat this condition. We also have other indications, topical skin indications. We are having incoming inquiries from physicians, and we will be running proof of concept studies in some of those. I can describe them more if you wish, but there's a number of conditions that this product has applicability. And as I've said to you, in epidermolysis bullosa at the get-go, our gene therapy is in a preclinical stage in actually one of the most severe forms of EB called dystrophic EB, which are the most severely affected, one of the most severely affected subpopulations. So we're kind of developing a franchise there. If you talk to EB patients, they want something now to deal with their wounds, so that's AP101. Long term, they want a cure. This is what we're working on longer term. We're trying to find transformative medicine in the longer term. And then our third pillar for value creation is to drop additional assets into the infrastructure that we have built across Europe, Middle East, Africa. So taking each of those in turn very briefly, and I say I've skipped most of the gory pictures here, but I just want to give you a sense of the sorts of conditions we're talking about. So Lojuxta is licensed for adult HoFH. We will run a study in children, so we will broaden that in the future if we can show equal effect and safety in children. But this is a patient connected to what you would normally probably associate with kidney dialysis. It's like a dialysis machine. It's called an apheresis device. 3 or 4 hours. This is one column of fats coming off this particular patient, and there could be more than that in that session. Unfortunately, when you take the lipids off, they come back because the liver is making around 60% of our cholesterol. So unless you can switch off the source, these patients just keep producing inordinate amounts of cholesterol. This is not a normal dyslipidemia that we may all run into when we're getting older and when we've been a bit naughty with our diet. This is really an exceptional situation that these patients find themselves in. And actually in the UK, for example, there's 7 hospitals that would specialise in apheresis for these patients. And we just announced reimbursement for our product in the UK a couple of weeks ago, which can be added into this to reduce the apheresis they have and get these patients to target. Target is the same as it is for you and I, to get them to a level where they're not at cardiovascular risk as much as they would otherwise have been if you left them with super high cholesterol. So, as I said, the exciting thing about this royalties-based deal is that it has funded the rollout of our initial footprint into our core markets in the EU5 and into our partner markets across Central and Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So we can now drop additional assets to leverage this. We have a market opportunity to go after now. As I say, we'll look at the pediatric population, we'll look at price and reimbursement in a number of markets. We had the UK success a couple of weeks ago, and more to come. So great situation on a royalties-based deal with no upfront to build this out and throw off profit into the wider business in year 1. Second pillar I mentioned was EB, the epidermolysis bullosa, or the butterfly children. Horrific condition, and apologies for these pictures. This is a dystrophic EB child at the top. So as I said to you, when these patients are born, if they survive through early childhood, they will sadly have very fragile skin, because the proteins in their skin that, for all of us, that makes our skin robust, when we pinch it, it goes back to its normal form, would create a blister and then a wound, and the wounding is perpetual. And some of the carers and parents of these children will spend sometimes 3 hours a day bandaging them to try and manage all of these wounds. So you can imagine we are very compelled as a rare disease company to see if our asset can bring significant value, not only in healing these, helping to speed up the healing of these wounds, but also in the pain, the itch, which is unbearable for these patients. And if they itch, they open more wounds, and the infection risks that they have. So we're studying all of that in that large study, and we will get those readouts in Q4 and then final data in Q2. The reason we are feeling positive about the phase 3 and why we went into it is 2 reasons. One is because we had proof of concept data where independently measured healing by physicians, blinded physicians who didn't know which wound half was treated with what. They was statistically significant that they picked wounds treated with our product were healing faster than with the wound dressing alone. It was small data, it was proof of concept data. The other reason was we had already run 3 pivotal trials, 1 in burns and 2 in split thickness skin grafts, which are used typically for severe burns, and all of those trials have been positive, showing accelerated healing. And these wounds here are also partial thickness wounds. They go through the first 2 layers of the skin, so the healing mechanism is shared in all partial thickness wounds, where what's called keratinocytes, stem cells, migrate, differentiate and grow new epithelium. Our product has been shown, at least in the laboratory, to accelerate that healing process. So we are now studying one of the more severe types of partial thickness wounding. And as I say, there are other conditions like this, which if we have time, I'm happy to talk about. So I'm very excited about this. I'm in pharmaceuticals, not just to make money. I started off in Pfizer. I worked for Amgen. I worked for Celgene, in cancer most of my career. And now I've landed in smaller companies working on grievous illness, which gets me out of bed in the morning because it's actually trying to do something useful for people who otherwise have very little to offer. So this is the timeline I mentioned to you. The phase 3 is running. It's a large study for this rare disease. So we'll have the readout in interim analysis in the end of this year, telling us continue, increase it a bit, or in the unlikely scenarios, stop it. That is the 3 scenarios. And if in Q2 of 19 the trial is positive, we'll file it to the FDA and the EMA in parallel and seek a license for that product in parallel. Both the EMA and the FDA have approved the design of this study. There will be a long-term extension to monitor these patients longer term, and we ran a non-clinical program to satisfy the FDA. If you follow Amryt, you will have seen a few days ago we just opened what's called an IND in the US, so we're opening US trial sites as part of that global study as we speak, which is very exciting to enter first footprint in the United States, which is a very large pharmaceutical market, as you all know. And then I said I'd mention these. We won't go into them in any detail, but because the product is already approved in partial thickness wounds, so burns typically would be the situation you'd see this. This is a patient with a burn in the phase 3. You can see the treated half on day 8. Not only was the speed of healing quicker in this population, but the quality of healing was better. So the colour, the colour and the feel of that skin was more normal, more rapidly. So the stimulation of growth of new epithelium has been shown in several studies. These sorts of other conditions, they range. This is a very, very nasty condition, which is very rare, where some patients have an adverse reaction to an antibiotic or a chemotherapy, and they start losing large amounts of skin. We've had incoming inquiries to run a trial in this population, so we're looking at proof of concept here. These are autoimmune conditions where the skin is blistering because the immune system is attacking it. So we've had incoming inquiries to look at it here. And also in the treatment of cancer, unfortunately, radiotherapy and chemotherapy can cause quite significant skin damage and similar wounding, similar partial thickness wounds. So actually Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York are looking at a proof of concept study to treat some of those severe ulcerating wounds from therapy, which do occur in head and neck tumours and GU tumours, etc. So positive interest there from physicians in a broader situation. And because our IP runway is quite long on this asset, it's incumbent upon us to look at other optionality alongside EB, which I've already described. So as I said to you, we in-licensed a gene therapy platform, which is the dream of patients in the longer term. Right now they want something for wounds because it's driving them mad not to have effective therapy to help them with healing, pain, itch, infection risk. But really what they want in the longer term is a cure. So the number of gene therapy companies out there, we are one of them now. This is a non-viral platform. Many gene therapies use a virus to take the correct DNA into the cells to correct the aberrant DNA. Some people, that has certain utility. Viruses also have some concerns from a safety perspective. This is a non-viral vector trying to take correct DNA into the cell. So I'll show you a couple of pictures in a minute in the laboratory where we've already seen strong effect here. And if you're looking at comps for this type of valuation for even early stage assets like that, then look at Crystal Biotech, who raised around 46 million in their IPO with a very similar stage asset as this. So by December or Q4 of this year, late Q4 of this year, we will release the first preclinical results on this platform before we take it into first in human studies. And let me just show you very quickly why we are excited about this. It's because if you have aberrant DNA that's coding for proteins in the skin, faulty proteins in the skin, you're trying to get correct DNA not only into the nucleus, get it copied or transcribed, translated into the correct protein. So we've combined the collagen 7 gene, which is faulty in dystrophic EB, the worst type of EB, and shown that it can be transported, uptaken into the cell, get into the nucleus, be copied, producing proper collagen 7, which the cell was unable to do. It's exciting. We're doing some work now in the United States with a couple of universities on the next stage around the integrity of that basement membrane, how efficient this model is, etc. So later in this year, we'll start to put out very similar information that you will see from Crystal Biotech, who have a similar set of experiments, but using a viral vector. So, this is an exciting area for future transformational opportunity, we hope, for these severely affected patients. So in-licensing is our other big focus. We focus on rare and orphan disease. That's simple, that's clear. We don't look at all and sundry. High unmet medical need underpins everything, because that's where the value is for us, is to tackle high unmet need in these patients. Where the opportunity is significant and reachable, or for a small organization like us, these are very concentrated markets from a customer point of view. As I gave the example, 7 hospitals in the UK deal with our first asset we've had approved. We can reach 7 hospitals with 1 person. We don't have to put a big division out there as you would in some big pharmaceutical companies. So we look for later stage assets typically going forward, and to try and leverage our footprint and to replicate our Lojuxta success that we've had. And then, as I said to you, with Joe and Rory in particular, and people like myself from an industry perspective, we have good visibility on what's out there, and we're engaging with a lot of companies to look at business development opportunities. So from a financials point of view, I would say forget 16, that was very early in the inception. This is post Lojuxta year 1. You're already throwing off. We have a small over-the-counter product we inherited in the acquisition of a German company that came with the EB product, so that's why it's more than the 12 million I showed you earlier. And then with significant investment into that global pivotal trial. Cash-wise, at that stage, 20 million with only half of a loan drawn from the EIB. So we have cash to data in Q2 of next year. So the investment case, in summary, is we are a revenue-generating orphan drug company. We've got a lot of experience in our management team, some of whom I've shown you, and a couple of others that are not on that slide, but a deep experience of pharmaceuticals, strong access to deal flow with our senior leadership and Harry on the board. We think we've got an exciting portfolio already, right? We're already doing great things. With some development assets in late stage, but also with commercial assets. A scalable infrastructure. We will enter the US, but I'm a big believer in 80-20. We won't start entering markets with our own infrastructure everywhere. We've got a lot of partners, distributor partners in what I call non-core markets, so we can access those populations at low risk to us. But where we have core markets, we will build out and leverage our footprint with additional assets. And I hope, at least to some extent, I convince you that the rare and orphan disease space remains a very attractive area of growth, actually outstripping the more common disease areas of growth in pharmaceuticals today. And my last slide, I won't go into it, just shows you some of the shareholding split, some of our contact details on some of the leadership of the company. And I'd like to welcome any questions you may have.
What you're dealing with is orphan and rare diseases.
Yes.
So by definition, the market must be small. So how am I going to get my money back?
So the market opportunity. So it's a $262 billion market in totality for orphan and rare diseases by 2026. It's growing at more than 10% a year, and the reason is that the per capita pricing of a rare, if it offers breakthrough results for patients, which is the key here, is much higher than you would see for a more common disease product. So there are a whole number of very successful rare disease products, some of them running into the multi-hundreds of millions and some of them running into the billion-dollar range as individual assets. And so the way we see it is that if we can bring something in EB, for example, that is in itself a $1 billion market opportunity that we would access a proportion of, right? As a small footprint company with our cost base and with a very, very focused customer concentration, that is a highly attractive growth opportunity.
So can you tell me what you define as rare then? What's the definition of rare?
The definitions around the world vary. So I'll give you the EMA example, so the European Medicines Agency. So they will say rare is less than 5 per 10,000 of population is the orphan definition. And the US is not wildly off that. It's 200,000 people in the United States, I think, they cap it at a fixed number. And in Japan, it's a slightly different number. So that gives you an idea of scale of population. So EB in the UK, there's quoted to be around 5,000 patients in total, and about 2,000 of those are severely affected, and they're treated through 5 hospitals. I can reach 5 hospitals with one person.
If I understand correctly,
yeah,
the product for partial thickness wounds is the same product for the EB, or am I off target? It's
correct,
and it's already approved for wide market.
Sure.
The point is that the commercial case is stronger if you can take it into a small.
Yeah.
My question, because I guess your product is kind of a repurposed product, right? You said you kind of acquired a German company, and presumably it's a repurposed product for graft treatment or something.
It's not repurposed. It's
it's a novel indication or a novel use for a pre-existing product, right?
Yeah, but there is no marketed product. It's not marketed, so it would be its first use would be EB, and it has patent protection out.
That is my question actually. So would it qualify under the 1983 Act of the FDA, which is the orphan drug protection and the extended patent?
Yeah, so it's a registered orphan drug under the FDA. It's a registered orphan drug under the EMA, and it's a pending discussion with the Japanese regulators. So yes, it's an orphan drug. And so in the United States, that's a 7-year exclusivity, but we have longer patent runway than that anyway. In Europe, that's a 10 plus 2 years if you do a children's study. You can get 12 years of exclusivity just on orphan, but we have longer patent runway anyway than that. So some companies will rely on orphan designation for its protection. We're relying on a combination of its formulation, its manufacturing, and its method of use, and its orphan designation. So we've got a strong patent suite, if you like.
Is the underlying product itself produced or being in production or being tested for some other application by any other provider?
No, because it's exclusively patented by us. So we extract the product and manufacture it ourselves, and we have, as I say, we have strong patent suite, and we have orphan designations. So it's unique to Amryt.
Given the pressure for these diseases, and let's say take EB, are you permitted to use it in a compassionate case? So some of these cancer drugs and things like that, they're given a compassionate use release. Yeah. Is that appropriate here?
Yeah, so there's a couple of approaches. So expanded access programs or compassionate use programs, yes, and they can be either paid or non-paid. So some governments, it varies in every country actually, some governments around the world acquire products even when they're not approved because it's such a severe condition. So I already have a number of prescriptions on the table from governments, from doctors in different countries, I won't go into all the details, where they're considering whether they'll purchase it before it's approved. So I'll give you an example of probably the most famous or well-organized early access scheme in the world. It's the French one, so it's called an ATU. And there's 2 types. You have a cohort or a nominative ATU. So if the regulators in France, if a doctor says, I want this, right, the regulators in France approve it, they can say, you can start using it before it's licensed on a named patient basis, which is your point. And then if they get used to that, they can make it into a cohort, so make it a bit more straightforward. And there are many cancer drugs I've worked on, and this type of product where it wouldn't be unusual that if doctors want to, we would support them in applying for an ATU. But that's fully reimbursed before it's launched. And if you're on a cohort ATU, when you hit license, they will continue reimbursing while you negotiate. And in other countries, they won't do anything. They won't allow that, except for what you mentioned, which is purely compassionate, where a doctor says, I've got nothing for this patient. And then it's really down to the affordability and the and we actually have an advisory board to help us with those decisions to try and take it away from the company. Also, whether we can afford to supply, we couldn't afford to supply everyone around the world with compassionate drug, but we do some compassionate supply for Lojuxta, for example, in a number of countries where the patients have got no option and it's off-label and no one's going to pay for it. So we've got a number of cases of children and of some other serious conditions where we've honoured the request.
Compassionate ones are not paid.
Compassionate ones are not paid, and we have very few of them. But there's plenty of opportunity where governments have schemes where they will pay if the condition is serious enough. And this is a great example of that, where I have prescriptions already being routed through governments right now.
You say the EB market is $1 billion. How do you value a market where there isn't a cure? So this isn't...
Well, what you do is you take an estimated price per patient based on what we understand about willingness to pay and the target product profile of this product, relatively conservatively actually. You look at the prevalent population, and then you look at the addressable pool within the prevalent population who maybe benefit from treatment, and then you look at duration of therapy in this case, because they're chronically treated. That's why it's such a high value market. They're on it for life, right? Every day or every other day. And you look at the thickness of application per your tube size and the frequency of application. Do they reapply it every day, second day, third day? Multiply all that out. That would be then a revenue forecast, and then I compare that against the total pool as a multiplication. One would tell me it's roughly $1 billion, and the other one would tell me what I'm actually going to get depending on my market penetration. So how much of that can I achieve? And that's not a number we would release, but if we had the first breakthrough wound care product approved in the world, we would want to the question earlier about value, we want to create a lot of value from that population.
So if you end up addressing both the EB market and the partial thickness, will you be charging the same per centiliter or whatever it is of the drug in each case?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. Because we're a rare disease company, my expectation on that is that the reason we might be able to do that, and we're analysing that now, is because it's acute use versus chronic. So the unit cost may stack up to be the same. We certainly won't damage our value creation opportunity as a sustainable rare disease company by doing both if it was to hamper that opportunity. And the serious unmet need is in EB. There are other things available for burns. So we'll have to manage that very carefully, but that's a very insightful thought.
You mentioned that the underlying cause of some of these diseases is genetics, genetics mutation, essentially.
Yes.
Are there any emerging or existing technology that's going to essentially replace what you're doing very fast? For instance, stem cell technology.
So yes, there are several companies exploring gene therapies in these populations. There's none that are going to suddenly remove this opportunity around the corner. So we have a full analysis of our competitive landscape today and tomorrow. As I say, if you ask patients now, they want wound care treatment because they're desperate for something. They all want cure and transformation. We have one, we're working on it as well. It has a similar longer horizon. Even if there was a breakthrough in that mid-horizon, then the availability of that to the whole EB population worldwide will be limited, right? Because gene therapies are very high cost and usually immediately available more in some Western populations. So, we're in that game. We see the market opportunity, is not at risk from that breakthrough. But I think we would join everybody in saying we want those breakthroughs ultimately to come, and we want to be one of the people that brings them with a franchise approach.
David, for EB and hycholesteremia, what other drugs are in clinical development at the moment? I'm not talking about the gene therapy, but what's the competition coming along for both of those?
So in EB, there are a couple of topical products in development, but one is for EB simplex. It's a company called Castle Creek. in the US. Similar phase to us, phase 3. We haven't got simplex patients, which is the less severe EB patients in our trial, so we don't directly overlap, but it's another topical treatment.
And what sort of drug does that use?
It's a diacerin compound, a drug that was used in inflammatory disease orally, but it's in a topical form. So that's the main topical that's in development. There's a lot of other deeper pipeline things coming, some in gene therapy and some in topical therapy. So in terms of the main topical that was head-to-head with us, just failed its trial, actually, it was Bullosa, and it's gone. What Amicus did, I might tell you, though, is we're incredibly, because John Crowley, who owns the company, who's the CEO, of the company, has 2 rare disease patients. He showed us his data, and that's why we've got amazing insight into the design of our trial. For homozygous FH, the main company that has an asset coming is a company called Regeneron, but the others tend to be companies like Amgen and Sanofi, who have anti-PCSK9 inhibitors, and they do have utility in HOFH, but they don't resolve the unmet medical need because they rely on the receptor pathway to be functional, and the receptor pathway is broken. So the main one is Regeneron, where it doesn't rely on the receptor pathway. That's in phase 2.
At least it was a general question, not a technical one.
Yeah.
If I can bring the rest
well, at least I could give him an answer. That's good.
David, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I got everything.